Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm the Reverend William Levwood. My pronouns are he and him, affectionately known as Rev Lev. I'm the minister here at Accotink, Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm so happy that you decided to join us this morning as we begin our sacred time together. I invite you, if you're in person, to silence your phones, and whether you're in person or online, to join in taking a deep breath together. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice.
Good morning, everybody, on this St. Patrick's Day. Good morning. Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Judy Robison. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. I hope you have a name tag, or you have put your name on your Zoom name tag if you're at home. If you need help with that online, let us know in the chat. If you aren't new to Accotink, look around. Do you see people you haven't met or you haven't spoken to in a while? These people like you and want to meet you. Help us live up to our mission to be a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home for all by reaching out and making a connection. By visiting this congregation, newcomers are in a moment of transition, and people in transitions are more open to new friendships. That means that your new best friend might be here this morning, and this is your chance to get to know them before someone else does. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour online and in person immediately after this service. We're so happy that you're here with us today. Welcome, everyone.
If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor.
So our theme this month is transformation. And I've been telling you that for a couple weeks now, I've been telling you that today we're going to focus on adapting to a changing world, and that's different than what's on our bookmarks that are the abbreviated version of our new proposed values, so one of which is transformation. What we have on those bookmarks is actually transform the world with love. But as I've said to you that adapting to change is more accessible everyday thing that we can explore, which I think is true to some degree, if we think about transforming the world with love as including our everyday interactions, right? Not some big grand thing, then the with love part is accentuated, and that's really important as well. So we're going to explore today how to adapt to a changing world in a way that transforms the world, ourselves, our relationships, guided by love. And then next Sunday, we're actually going to, in a way, take a break from our monthly theme for transformation. We have a social justice focus every single year that we pick. Last year was transgender justice. The year before that, it was racial justice. This year, it's reproductive justice. And we're going to look at intimate partner violence next week, both in general and how that intersects with reproductive justice. And not only are we going to do that in the service, but then you can come online at 5 p.m. for an after-church discussion to go even more in depth into that. And I encourage you to do that. And then after that, the next Sunday is Easter. Now, some people think that maybe we shouldn't talk about Easter as Unitarian Universalists because while And individual Unitarian Universalists may be Christian. We're not really a Christian tradition anymore, but I think we have a lot to say about Easter, about the images. I've been seeing, actually, as I've been thinking about the service, I've been seeing examples of resurrection everywhere, in popular movies, in books, in songs. So we're going to look at that idea of resurrection and what it means in our lives and what it means in the larger world on Easter.
Good morning. So today's Time for All Ages is from Ashima Shiraishi. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. One of the world's youngest and most skilled climbers. Ashima tells a true story of strength and perseverance in rock climbing and in life. To a rock climber, a boulder is called a problem, and you solve it by climbing to the top. There are twists and turns, falls and scrapes, and obstacles that seem insurmountable until you learn to see the possibilities within them. And then there is the moment of triumph when there's nothing above you but sky and nothing below but a goal achieved. Ashima draws on her experience as a world-class climber in this story that challenges us to tackle the problems in our own lives and rise to greater heights than we would have ever thought possible. How to solve a problem: The Rise and Falls of a Rock Climbing Champion by Ashima Shiraishi, and illustrations by Yao Zhao. I am Ashima. What I do is climb. What I do is solve problems, which is to say, I make them mine. We climbers call all our boulders problems. We also call our problems problems. And to solve them both is sort of the same. Once I had a problem and it stretched into the sky. It was tremendously endless. It was bigger than thinking. It was as huge as the air or the night or the planet. It was a problem bigger than any I had ever seen, and I have seen plenty. There were twists and turns. There were places that looked as slick as glass. One part was arched like a question mark. Another part stuck out like my father's elbow in a photo I have seen of him dancing. And another was shaped like the bolts of fabric stacked in my mother's sewing room. There were many parts, and none of them looked easy. I sighed and clapped my hands full of chalk, which is what I do before I solve a problem. I held this problem in my head. I mapped out every step. Each place I would put my hand, and then I began to climb. Dug my toe into the dot of the question mark, jammed my fingertips into the bend of my father's dancing elbow, kicked my leg over my mother's fabric. And then, for a moment, the world slipped from under me. I was climbing on nothing but air. The ground beneath me rushed up and pressed into my back like the hand of a giant named gravity. So I dusted myself off. Dad asked how I was feeling. He passed me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and for a while we just sat there. Then when I was ready, I looked at the problem again with new information the fall had given me. Each fall is a message, a hint, an idea, a new way to move from over there to over here. And so I started, and so I fell, and so I climbed again, listening to what the fall had told me. The problem that was endless, which I broke into little pieces, the problem that gave me hints with each fall, and surely and quickly I climbed the wall. I dug my fingers there and here and stretched my arms like ropes. I threw my body through the air and caught myself in all the ways I'd imagined. A bright path of thinking. And there, at the top of the problem, I looked down at the bolts of the fabric, the dot of the question mark, the bend of the elbow, and I waved hello at the memory of how hard the problem was. And I looked for one more problem more.
So some of you were here 2 Sundays ago when I spent my sermon defining spirit. And even though I spent a whole sermon on that, I'm going to talk about it again. And I'm going to talk about it mostly in different ways than I did last week. I think the easiest thing we could say is that when we talk about growing in spirit, which is one of the lines of our mission statement at this church, and also is similar to a line in our new value of transformation as Unitarian Universalists that we're considering, which says that we collectively grow and transform ethically and spiritually. The easiest thing that we could say about what we mean by spirit is that we mean the spirit of love. The spirit of love that we just explored in meditation, that we mean that we're committed to transforming the world, guided by love. So that's important. This isn't just transformation for transformation's sake or adaptation for adaptation's sake. It's guided by love. But I also want to look at these words, spirit and grow, because I think that they're illustrative of some important things. So a very basic way to understand what spirit means is as the essence of something. We speak of having the spirit of courage or the spirit of patience or the spirit of generosity that you just practiced with our offering. So spirit can mean the essence of something. It can also mean, to my mind, the heart and the mind and the body all together. Integrated. Now, it's important to define spirit this way because particularly in Paul's letters in the New Testament, there's a fair amount of language where spirit is pitted against flesh. That's not what we mean when we talk about growing in spirit. We mean spirit to mean that all-encompassing wholeness that includes our bodies, our minds, and our hearts. And then the other thing I talked about 2 weeks ago that I just want to lift up again is the spirit of life, this idea that there's something that connects us all together as people and with the larger world. In many religious traditions, the word for spirit, particularly in the Abrahamic traditions, is also cognate with the word for breath. So we breathe in and we breathe out. We're sharing the same air. So this is an interdependent spirit that we're talking about. Let's talk for a moment about grow. What does it mean to grow? It's different than build. It's different than other ways that we could talk about things. So I think it has 2 basic meanings. One is to learn, and specifically to mature. We talk about growing up. But the other way I think is equally as important. It also means to thrive and to flourish, right? When a plant grows, that means it's thriving, it's flourishing, it's expressing itself fully, it's healthy. So let's put these together. So to grow in spirit if we look at spirit as the essence of something, means to grow in virtue. Whatever that virtue is, courage, patience, and always that virtue is contextual. Patience isn't always what we need, but when it's what we need, then we want to connect with that spirit of patience. When we talk about growing in terms of spirit as the melding of our heart, body, and mind, we're talking about growing in spirit, meaning to grow in wholeness, to grow in integration. And when we talk about growing in terms of spirit as the spirit of life, we mean to grow in partnership with each other and with the interdependent web of life. So when I was a modern dancer, we did this exercise in this dance company I was in Charlottesville, where we would have someone enter the space and they would ask themselves, what does the space need? And then they would begin to move. And then the rest of us would look at that space and what was now in the space, and we would ask ourselves, well, what does the space need now? And then we would enter and we would add in those elements, and so on and so forth. And there was always a next move to be made. Even if you didn't like what was in the space, there was always a next move that you could make to add or to pull focus, to contrast or to complement what was happening. But I've realized that this idea of using that idea, what does the space need, right? This is a question we can ask ourselves, feels a little too open-ended. So I want to add in this idea of what it means to grow in spirit. So if we add these two things together, what it means to grow in spirit to this idea of what does the space need, then we come up with these kinds of questions for ourselves. What does virtue look like in this moment? In this context, not in the abstract, but in this particular moment, what would be the next move that would be virtuous, that would increase the experience of love in this moment? We can also ask, what does wholeness look like in this moment? What does it mean in this moment to integrate my heart, body, and mind? What movement or action, what stillness, what silence or words is called forth when we say, what does wholeness look like in this moment? And then lastly, if we connect with that spirit of life, that interconnected spirit, then the question becomes, what does partnership look like in this moment? Then we focus on the space between us and the other person. And also, I think it's important to notice that the space between and the space encompassing includes us. So what does partnership look like in this moment? Includes love for ourselves and love for the other. We're looking for the balance between love for ourselves and love for the other in each moment. I want to give you another simple tool that you can use in your life for this. This comes from the Circle Way. They have 3 practices. I just love these. To me, these are the covenant underneath every covenant. They recommend the practice of listening with attention, speaking with intention, and tending to the whole. Now, this is used for discussion groups. That's why it uses the words listen and speak. But I want to expand that for us. When we say listen with attention, we could also say bear witness, observe, right? We're not just listening with our ears, we're noticing body language, or even there's a kind of listening when we're looking at systems in the world and how those systems function. And then we're speaking or acting, we're responding with intention. And we're guided by this commitment to the whole, to the common good, as our hymn earlier spoke of. We're tending to the whole, which again includes us, but not just us, everybody else too. It's not easy always to be a team player. We can get caught in our own preferences and think, oh, the goal of life is to assert my preferences in the world. But what if we're really committed to this covenant underneath the covenant, to tending to the whole, to always being a team player, to looking for what does the space need where I get to do the dance I'm called to in this moment, and so does everybody else get to do the dance that they're called to in this moment. Now, so far I've been talking about this, I think it's coming across as in each individual moment. Like, I'm right here talking to you, you're right there listening to me, present moment. But time doesn't only work that way. The past lives within our bodies, right? And influences us. We have habits that either help or hinder us from that responsive moment in the present. And then some changes, some adapting to a changing world requires us to take multiple steps after steps after steps, movement after movement after movement, in order to make change. Ed Kringer was just sharing about our legislative advocacy. One of the things that Ed has taught me about that is that often a bill, like most often, a bill doesn't get passed the first time it's put up. Often not even the second time. Sometimes it's the third time or even 5 or 10 years down the road, but we put in the work to lay the groundwork so that that legislation that's needed can be passed, so that our world can be transformed with love, that we can adapt to a changing world to make the world better. So this is true in our larger societal life. It's also true in our individual life. So I'm going to share a story from my life. I decided that I needed to be exercising more about 6 months ago. Raise your hand if you've ever made that decision. Yeah. So I did some things accidentally or without, I didn't do research on habit building before doing this, but I did some things that were helpful. So I got myself a fold-up bike, so it was really easy to keep in my car. So now my car is completely associated with biking. Like I really just do two things. I drive my car to bike, or I drive my car here to do my job, right? Those are the main, I do other things, grocery shopping, etc. But those are the main two things. So my car, if I just get in my car, I'm like, maybe I should go biking, right? It's associated together. I chose biking because of Burke Lake, because you can bike from here to a path that goes around Burke Lake. So I was thinking, like, how can I build this into my daily schedule? And I thought, I'm going to do this before my office hours each day. I'm going to put my child on the bus, I'm going to hop in my car, I'm going to bike around Burke Lake, and then I'm going to start my work day. So I was using, since then I've read some about making habits, and I was using some of the tools that they suggest. I was using habit stacking and temptation bundling, right? I was connecting the work schedule that I had to do with this thing that I wanted to do, so that whenever I was going to do one, I was likely to do the other. They were bundled together. And I was also using the environment to support this habit, right? I got the bike in the car, it's ready to go at any moment. I've got Burke Lake, right? By design, I chose biking so that I could use this environment that's part of my life. But I also had a precipitous event happen. I was talking with somebody about my back issues. And they said, actually, as they were leaving the room where we were talking, almost as an afterthought, they said, would you like an accountability partner for that exercise? And I said, well, I've never thought about that before, but yes, I think I would like that. And this is important because there's a real strong connection between making habits and social support in multiple aspects. In his book, Atomic Habits, author James Clear says that one of the most effective things you can do to build better habits is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. I'm going to say that one more time. One of the most effective things you can do to build better habits is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. He continues, writing, nothing sustains motivation better than belonging to the tribe. It transforms a personal quest into a shared one. You can join any tribe or culture you want as long as it includes this congregation. Serious though, just by coming here, you're yoking yourself to a group of people who've made some commitments to care for each other in community, to grow in spirit, to act for justice, to be welcoming and inclusive. You're saying, I want to do these things. This is who I am. I'm going to join a group of people who are going to help me live out those commitments. So another way you can use the social world is to imitate people who are masters at something. And I have a funny example of this. I was just listening to a podcast that suggested, get this, it's blowing my mind to just think about the ramifications of this. So as religiosity has gone down, which a lot of church folks, a lot of my colleagues in Christian churches will bemoan. People aren't coming to church anymore. And it's always a weird moment as a Unitarian Universalist, right? Because you're like, well, I want people to come to the Unitarian Universalist congregation, but it's not really because I think they need to be religious in a particular way, right? So I'm not sure it's a bad thing that people are not as religious these days. But here's the idea that really blew my mind. It's the idea that we're longing for this experience of tribe, and if we're not getting it from religion, where else are we getting it? And the suggestion was that we might be getting it from watching the Super Bowl, right? From that shared experience of being a fan, or from being a fan of a particular kind of music. We're part of BTS's army, right? Or we're a Swiftie. I don't know. It's interesting to think about this. I love BTS's music. I love Taylor Swift's music. I don't know if they're really good substitutes for what religion does in our life. But then again, I don't know that they aren't. Right? So just to give one more example of how this can motivate us, this being a tribe, a member of this congregation was telling me that when Taylor Swift announced that she got ready for her Eras tour, where she sings 43 songs. That's like twice as many songs in a concert as anybody else sings in a concert. And she's dancing and running around while she's doing. She got ready for that. For 6 months, she was on a treadmill singing the songs on the treadmill. And if it was up-tempo song, the treadmill would go faster. If it was a slower song, it would go slower. So that's kind of interesting. But here's the thing that's really fascinating that a member of this congregation told me, is that people are choosing to get in shape by mimicking that behavior. So they'll turn on Taylor Swift, her set list for the Eras tour, and they'll get on the treadmill and they'll sing along to the songs to get in shape. It sounds silly, but it's a good way to yoke your desire to a larger community that you're part of and get inspiration and motivation from that, to adapt to the world, to make a new habit in this case for your own well-being. So I want to switch gears for a moment, and I want to share this thing also from Atomic Habits. He tells a story of a professor of photography who did this experiment. He assigned some students to be graded on how many photos they took. Just how many photos they took during the semester. Pure quantity. He assigned another part of the class to be graded on one photo. All they had to do was take one amazing photo, and they'll be graded on that. So he discovered a curious thing. The people who took the best photo were actually the people assigned to the quantity group, who were taking hundreds of photos throughout the semester. Because in taking those hundreds of photos, they were experimenting. They were trying new things, looking at the lighting, looking at the subjects they were choosing to photograph, trying new things. Whereas the people who were told they were going to be graded just on that one photo had many of them didn't even have a photo to show. They just had an idea for the photo. They had theories about how they were going to photograph this perfect photo, but they weren't actually taking any photos. So this is the core of what I mean when I say there's always a next move. Okay, this is a mantra I've mentioned before that I use in my own life. There's always a next move. So that means take lots of photos. It means don't be afraid that you're going to say something that you can't take back. It's going to be the wrong thing, and that's it. Because if you're afraid of that, you're never going to take a good photo, right? You're never going to learn how to communicate with other people. Don't be afraid of whether you're going to write the perfect letter to your legislator. Write the first letter, and write the second letter, and write the third letter. Make the next move. So if we take this to this growing in spirit idea, how do we know what is virtuous? If we're asking ourselves, what is the virtuous thing to do in this moment? We try something. We experiment in each context, in each moment. And then we learn from what happens next, and then we adapt for the next time in the similar or different context. How do we know what's going to integrate us and make us feel whole? We experiment, we try something, we learn from what we tried, and we adapt based on our learning in the next moment. How do we grow in partnership with each other and the world? We experiment, we learn from what happened, and we adapt based on that new learning. This is the heart of the wisdom. There's always a next move. There's always a next move. You may have heard that it takes 10,000 hours of practicing something to become a master at it. But it's actually been clarified that it takes 10,000 iterations. That means that each time you redo that thing, you're doing it a little bit differently. You're learning something new every time you shoot that jumper. Every time you shoot it, you're learning something new. So this is also why, to go back to my accountability partner, why that is so helpful. Because not only do you try something, but then you engage in dialogue with this other person. You say, I tried this thing. So for example, I'm going to go back to my biking. So initially I was into it, right? I was excited, and I biked like 5 days in a row. In fact, I wanted to check out the Burke Lake Trail. I think I biked 12 and a half miles the first time. First time out, come on, are you all impressed? Might have been 15, I don't know, it was a lot, right? But then I missed it quite a few days. And then I got quite a few days in a row, and then I missed a few, and all the time I'm texting with my accountability partner about what's going to help make it work. One thing I noticed was that I don't actually come to the office enough for how often I wanted to be biking. So I had to figure out a new plan. I had to find a trail that was closer to my house for those days when I wasn't coming here, and then I had to find a way to connect that so that I would go. And still, I noticed I had this kind of slump streak thing going on where I'd do a bunch of days, and then I'd miss a day, and then I'd miss like 5 days. 2 weeks even. I know, I did the 12-mile thing, and I was like, ooh, all right, awesome. And I'm like, yeah, I missed like 2 weeks in a row. And then my accountability partner said, what if you actually just need a day or two off every week? And I hated that idea. I mean, because my back felt great, and I didn't even do this for my mental health, but my mental health was like amazing the days I would bike. I was like, no, I gotta do it every single day. But I was smart enough to kind of sit with that, right? My accountability partner had won my trust. They'd been helping me out. And so I was like, you know what? I wonder if there's something to that. And then I had a month in February where I biked like 21 days out of, how many days out of February? Out of 29. Because I broke out of that all or nothing thinking. That idea broke me out of it. And I gave myself break days. And then I noticed that I wasn't just biking first thing in the morning on my way to work, but sometimes I'd sneak it in the afternoon right before my kid got home on the bus. Or I'd even do it at the very end of the day, like racing against the sun, like, can I even get around Burke Lake before it gets dark, right? So the point is that I'm in dialogue and learning with my accountability partner, and I'm learning the things that work for me. Actually, none of these habit books said, they did say break out of the all or nothing thinking, but they didn't say to just like bike whenever you want. In fact, they say like choose a time and a place, yoke your habit to that. And that had worked for a while, but then I needed a different learning, right? There's always a next move. Yeah? We always need to be trying different things. Don't be a perfectionist. Not in the way that it stops you from acting because you want to take that perfect picture and you're scared you won't take that perfect picture. Be a practionist. You haven't heard that word before? I just coined it. Be a practionist, not a perfectionist, a practionist. All right, I want to share one other way to look at this that also comes from this book, Atomic Habits. So just think about that word atomic. Okay? Atoms are the smallest thing that we have, the smallest form of matter. So atomic habits means small habits, small changes. But then also we think of atomic energy, which is like huge amount of energy. So we make these small actions to create these big results. Atomic habits. It's pretty clever, yeah? But there's one other way that the author meant for us to understand and use that term atomic. He said that atoms combine into molecules, and then molecules combine into cells, and then cells, and so on and so forth to create bigger systems, bigger structures. So sometimes we're looking for a magic bullet, right? We're looking for that one thing that's going to make us develop the new habit, that's going to change us, that's going to transform us. But a big learning that James Clear is trying to give us is that we need to yoke all these small atoms together to make a system. He shares the example of when he wanted to read more. He didn't do just one thing. He started by choosing books that he really liked, right? That he wanted to read, that were pleasurable. He got those books on Audible. He put Audible on his home screen on his phone or tablet so he would see it before he went to any other things. He also bought physical copies of the books and just put them around the house so he'd be reminded over and over again, oh yeah, I said I wanted to read that book. Maybe he doesn't even read the book because he's got them on Audible, but he's being reminded. He made a commitment to read 1 page before bed. And he said it was the system of all of these things that helped. So that if he didn't read that 1 page before bed one night, instead of feeling like, oh, I missed it, I'm a failure, give up my habit, what happened was that he got up in the morning and he went downstairs, and there on the kitchen table was the book to remind him that he still had that goal. Or he opened up his iPad and there was the Audible app to remind him. So he used multiple techniques. So there's always a next move also means that we don't stop with one change or one transformation. We're always doing those 10,000 iterations to figure out what's the next move. What's the next move? We can do it with things we're not very good at. We can do it with things that we're really good at that we want to get even better at. So I'm going to share one more idea about something that helps with habits. It's called the law of least effort. So it turns out that willpower is helpful maybe at the beginning, but we run out of willpower. What we do is the things that require the least effort. And James Clear in his book uses an example from Jared Diamond's book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. It's a really interesting example, and I want to lift it up for 2 reasons. He says that Jared Diamond looked at the shape of continents to explain why some societies advanced and conquered other societies, developed more technology. And what he noticed was that continents tend to be either north-south shaped, like North and South America and Africa, or east-west shaped, like Eurasia. Why that's important is because if you're transferring agricultural learning east to west, you're still in the same climate or a similar climate, right? So that knowledge is going to be easy to replicate. If you're doing that in a north to south continent, the climate is changing dramatically. You can't grow the same stuff in the tropics as you can in the Arctic part of that continent. So you have this sharing of agricultural knowledge that creates surpluses of food that then leads to the technological advances of military might that makes the Eurasian continent more powerful and more successful in a certain way. Okay? However, I want to point something else out. Do you know that 70% of the food that's eaten in the world comes from the Americas? 70%. That north-south continent, do you see what it did? Because you couldn't just have this monoculture of wheat or rice and learn how to make bigger yields of that particular high-calorie thing, you ended up with a culture that figured out how to domesticate more plants, more food stuff than any other. Do you see that? So the very thing that was good for adaptation, for innovation, was not good for this other thing, right? So I want to bring this up too as another way to understand there's always a next move. That if we want to make a simple habit, like biking, then we want to go with the least effort. But if we're really responding and adapting to a changing world, a complex changing world, then we want to try a lot of different things so that we can have diversity, and that diversity can make us flourish and thrive, right? That's actually better for growth. So, to sum up, there's always a next move, and we take it together to grow our spirits, to transform the world with love, to move towards more virtue, more wholeness, more partnership. There's always a next move. We don't have to know all or even very many of the steps to get to where we're going right now in this moment if we keep in mind that there's always a next move. Because then all we're asking ourselves to do is to take the next move. May it be so. May we be among those who make it so.